And welcome back to the Talking Archive. It's again a privilege to be speaking with Ed Mackay, announcer, radio personality. And Ed, thanks again for being with us.
Well, I'm having a good time. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and last time we talked about Gary Owens just before we ended the show. And Gary, I got to work with at the Music of Your Life. And he's one of the nicest personalities I've ever met. World famous Tom Murphy actually introduced the two of us. It was back in late 1995 when the second edition of the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows came out. And Gary did two game shows, Letters to Laugh In, as well as The Gong Show.
Yes. He was one of the hosts of The Gong Show. Mm-hmm. And, of course, many people remember him from Laugh In.
Definitely.
That beautiful downtown Burbank. And he and I would audition for some projects together. And it was always funny to me. He said, all right, well, we'll run a Gary Owens type. Well, Gary's sitting there. What do you mean? Gary Owens type? Well, we're kind of looking for somebody a little less expensive. All right. And he was so funny. He was, like I say, he was one of the nicest guys that you ever want to meet. And he was always dropping names. Mm-hmm. Names of people he knew, Tim Conway, Maury Amsterdam. But the point is, or what I'm getting to, is he wasn't dropping names. He knew them. He'd have lunch with these people over at a deli on Ventura Boulevard. I think it was Jerry's Deli over on Ventura Boulevard, for breakfast or lunch. I mean, he knew all these people. He lived in Studio City.
I remember when I worked at Music of Your Life, I hadn't seen him in a while, and one of the board operators said, "Hey, Josh, Gary asked how you're doing because he hasn't seen you in a while." I was like, that just meant the world to me. It's like a nobody board operator like me, he's asking how's it going? So, one afternoon, Tom Murphy and I had lunch with Margaret Carey, who was the actress they modeled Tinkerbell after. And so I said to Gary, Tom Murphy and I are having lunch down at Shaker's. And he says, well, tell Tom I said hi. And then about 45 minutes into lunch, Tom Murphy got a telephone call at the front desk. He says, oh, that's Gary. He's coming over. And so Gary joined the three of us. And Margaret had to leave probably about half an hour after that. But we were with Gary for about 2 hours. He was telling all these great stories. Like he said one time he was at a station up in San Francisco, and he said to his newsman, make up a bank name. Just give me the name that sounds like a bank, but it's really not. He's like, okay. So Gary gets on the air and says, okay, listen up, everybody. Go to the hometown bank. When you go up to the teller, tell them I listen to KEWB Channel 91. Now stick them up. And when you do, they'll give you some money. Well, it turns out that actually was a local community bank in the area. And so some 9-year-old boy goes up to the teller and says, I listen to KEWB Channel 91. Now stick them up.
Well, and when Garish, everybody called him Garish.
Oh, yeah.
When Garish was at KMPC for many years, he would come up with things like that. And I remember one time, he was sending autographed photos out of the 110 freeway. They actually took a picture of the Harbor Freeway, the 110 freeway, and autographed it. Hi from the 110 freeway. And they'd mail it to people who would call in and leave their address. It was funnier than heck. It was a great promotion. I mean, that was Gary.
I'd expect something like that from a station that had no budget whatsoever for He says, not like the number one station at the time.
But that's how crazy Gary was. He was just, over the top. He him, Dick Whittinghill, in the mornings, at KMPC, when that was like, the number one station. They were owned by Gene Autry. And they would come up. And I live currently in the Mission Viejo area. And long before it was famous, Mission Viejo, back in the late 60s, early 70s, Dick Whittinghill lived here.
Wow.
And he and a bunch of his country club buddies decided that the city needed a St. Patrick's Day parade. And so they got 4 or 5 guys together, and this was before they even had a lake. Just outside the country club, they went marching. They, and that parade over the years grew. They don't have it now, but it grew to where it was a major local parade. Now, I say major local parade because, they'd have cheerleaders, they'd have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. They had, in fact, I was in the parade once when I was working at KWAZ in Orange County as a quote-unquote celebrity. And we were sitting in a sedan. Now, nobody could see who the heck was in that car. And there was a sign on the side. And we're waving. Nobody had a clue. But, they'd have, a couple of people in a trash truck, waving. But that was, that
was Oscar the Grouch there?
No, that was before Oscar the Grouch. But yeah, Dick Whittinghill and some friends started that.
Kind of reminds me. Kind of reminds me of an Orange County version of the Doodah Parade almost.
Yes.
One year, KRLA Radio, Dave Hall, the hullabalooer, said, we're going to have a float in the Doodah Parade, so send your junk into KRLA and we'll glue your junk to the float and we'll have the KRLA junk float in the Doodah Parade.
Yeah, well, that was the one they threw tortillas and, guys with briefcases would do some kind of drill. Do they still do that?
I think so, but they never televise it. Well, of course, they don't televise the Hollywood Christmas parade till about, I don't know, a week or two after it actually happens, by which time most people don't care anymore.
And frankly, the Christmas parade isn't what I grew up watching anyway.
No, it was originally called the Santa Claus Lane Parade, and Gary Owens actually did host it for a couple of years. I've got a TV guide somewhere.
And oh gosh, Bill
Welsh?
Bill Walsh, because Channel 11 back then here in Los Angeles and in Channel 5 were both close to each other, and they were the ones that would actually broadcast it.
That's right.
The parade. And it started on Sunset Boulevard at the 101 freeway. And I think, it started with Johnny Grant, I think, was the mayor.
That's right, yeah.
Quote unquote mayor. There was no real city of Hollywood. And for many years, Johnny Grant was, Yeah.
I remember halfway through the parade every year, Johnny Grant and Gene Autry and some of their cowboy buddies would be gathered in a room, the green room at the KTLA studios, and they always say, "This is the best Christmas parade we've ever had." And they said that every single year. This is the best parade ever.
Yeah. But back then you had celebrities. We don't have the celebrities they had in the 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. And that's what made Hollywood. But the parade was a celebrity event. It was, you'd watch it and you'd wait for Santa Claus to come at the end. Mm-hmm. And the one of the funny things I remember is the hosts of the parade. They had this great big long microphone on a candy cane, so that they could talk to people on the floats.
It's like Bob Barker eats your heart out, right?
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah.
Hopefully they didn't poke anybody's eye out.
Yeah.
Or accidentally yank them off the float.
But it was fun as a kid to watch. It was a great parade, and it was on Thanksgiving night.
Wow!
It was it was Thursday night, Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. It was right after you had your Thanksgiving dinner, and it was on Thursday night. It wasn't on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. It was that night.
Wow!
And that was one of the things you watched when you were a kid.
Eventually, Bob Eubanks took over as host for many years. He hosted with Leanne Merriweather, and then one year, I remember, Merriweather wasn't available for some reason, so Stephanie Edwards, his Rose Parade co-star, hosted with him, and then later on, Lisa Gibbons took over the co-hosting role with Eubanks.
Well, yeah, and I think we're talking about the Rose Parade. I don't remember.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the Hollywood Christmas Parade.
Sorry?
The Hollywood Christmas Parade on KTLA, at least that version, was hosted by Eubanks, I think come the 1980s.
I can't say that I remember that, but I'm not surprised. He had a contract with KTLA Channel 5 here in L.A. For the Rose Parade, and of course, why wouldn't you put him on the Hollywood Parade?
Oh, yeah.
I just don't remember that. But like we said before, Bob was a great guy to work with. He and I worked together on a Powerball the game show, and it was a national game show. What a nightmare that show was. Usually with game shows, just to give you some background, they do 5 to 6 shows a day. Mm-hmm. You do a show, and then you stop for about 20 minutes, reset, and do a show. And I was the announcer on the show. But with this show, the California Lottery had to oversee it. It had to be, and I don't know if you remember the scandals back in the 40s, 50s.
Oh yeah.
The $64,000 question, stuff like that. I think Jack Barry was part of that too, as I recall.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say he was a host, and I think he produced the show, whatever show it was, but he was involved in the scandal.
Yeah, 21, and then what ended up happening was Herb Stempel said, I don't think Jack didn't know who the contestants were going to win, because he says, if I knew, then I wouldn't be surprised like everybody else was, but Dan Enright did. And Herb Stempel thought this wasn't so, but he said, I don't think Jack even knew it was being fixed, because one time Dan Enright came into a session where he was giving Herb Stempel the answers, and Jack comes in suddenly, and Dan Enright shuts the briefcase, suddenly, and just like, does Mr. Barry know? And Dan's like, no, well, that's not for you to know whether or not he knows about it. But the thing was, everybody knew. The networks knew, and fortunately, Jack Barry was the fall guy in that regard.
Yes.
But so many other people were involved. Even Louis G. Cowan, who created the $64,000 question, had nothing to do with the scandals, but he got blackballed anyway because it was his creation, and he never worked in game shows ever again.
Yeah. Well, and that's what set up all the rules and regulations for how game shows were done in the future. One of Barry's shows, didn't Jack do Joker's Wild at one point?
Yeah, he was the creator and host of Joker. He did it for about 12 years until his passing, and then Bill Cullen. Yeah. So that was his. Well, he had several other big comebacks, but Joker's Wild was definitely the big comeback, with CBS returning game shows to the network after about 4 years of no quiz shows whatsoever in daytime. And the story was, they didn't want him as host, but actually they did. Fred Silverman embraced Jack as MC because basically the general public had forgiven the scandals, but the media just kept wanting to rehash it over and over and over again.
Sure.
But Jack said by 1960 he was in Texas selling scented magazine covers to make a living, and people are saying, hey, when are you going to be back on television? We'd love to see you back there. He says, I knew that at that point it was my chance to try to get back into TV because the general public was saying, hey, we miss you, man.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back to my point, the show was so regulated that we had to finish a game before we could continue on. And there were some complicated games in that show. We would spend an hour on one particular game. Then they had to take it to post-production and edit it down so that they could fit it in the show. We had production days that went into 12, 14 hours. And we used to shoot that show over at the old KCET studios on Sunset Boulevard. That was what a nightmare that was. And Bob, there was a female model. Actually, he's married to her now. I can't remember her name. It was the three of us, as well as, of course, all the production crew, and it was, and we would bring in the same audience every time we shot. It was audiences are invited to come to the show. You can go to a game show for free. Most people don't realize that.
Wow.
But
I'm surprised people
give out tickets. I'm sorry?
I'm surprised people thought you'd had to pay admission to get into a game show.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But they'd be giving out tickets outside of the Grauman Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, and shuttle you over to the studios. CBS, NBC, up over ABC, which was up in Glendale, so that you could watch them, do the shows, and you'd be there for 3 shows at least. Well, you get an audience in there, and in some cases they paid audiences to be there. They would pay $10 a person for a group, say a church group or a military group or something like that, just so they could fill the seats, because they needed, an audience. It's not like today where, they hardly have an audience because of the, COVID thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, we would shoot 3 or 4 shows, and we'd be there for 14 hours or more.
Oh, man.
Normally they do, I think I mentioned it before, normally they do like 3 3 shows, change the audience, and do 2 or 3 more, and we'd be done. And if everything was working properly, you do pretty much live to tape, as we called it, a show, and then we'd stop so they could reset on for 20 minutes, and then you do a show live to tape. Now, I remember when I was doing Treasure Mall with Hal Sparks.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, before anybody knew who the heck Hal Sparks was. And he was a talented person. He was a writer. He did some production. He was, I think, the lead on a cable show a few years ago. But he was just a great kid, as far as I was concerned, because he's younger than me. But on the show, we had special effects. We had, it was one of those slime shows that you used to see on Nickelodeon years ago.
It was during the Double Dare craze, I remember. They had that, and they had Slime Time with Marty Cohen, which was actually back-to-back with Treasure Mall.
Yeah. And we were syndicated. We weren't on a particular network. So when someone won, we had what they called confetti cannons. And so the confetti cannons, the person won and everything was great. And it, if you're watching, I don't know, America's Got Talent or something like that, you see all the confetti coming around. Well, we had them backstage, and they were all set and ready at the beginning of the show, so that when the show progressed, they could be fired. Well, we were counting up to start the show. 3, 2, 1, bam! And the confetti cannons went off. Somebody hit the wrong button. We had to stop the show, obviously, clean the stage, reset the cannons. I mean, it was... God.
How long do you think that took to do that?
It took a half an hour.
Oh, that's not too bad, but still.
To clean the stage, to reset the cannons, and producer, director, they were not happy.
What was the production company for Treasure Mall? Do you recall by chance?
No, I don't. To tell you the truth, I knew the producer and director because we'd worked on several shows before, and I can't remember at the moment their names. But no, I don't remember. It was Fiedler Berlin. That's what it was.
Oh, yeah, I remember that production company.
Yeah. Rob Fiedler was director. Peter Berlin was producer. And I worked with them on many pilots. And we did a lot of shows together. In fact, one game show, it wasn't a game show. It was one of, when they were doing the judge shows, we did Love Court. Now, Love Court was a parody on going into trial and trying to put a couple together. Why they were having trouble, he didn't like the window open when sleeping. She needed it open during sleep, that kind of thing. It was sad. It was parody. And so we did quite a few pilots, and I can't remember who the celebrity judge was, and I was the bailiff. I was actually on stage in a sheriff's uniform, and I was on camera, And if you've ever seen me, you know that's ugly sight. I've got a face for radio, not television. And so we did the show, and it was I think Telepictures was the basically the owners of the show, something like that. Well, the show never went anywhere. It never got picked up. It never went anywhere. But they were making films at the same time as well.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you remember Red Heat with Arnold Schwarzenegger and I think Belushi, but I don't remember.
I think so.
Anyway, yeah, I'm in one of the first scenes.
Wow.
Of that movie. There's a scene. There's a scene where a hooker leaves the bed of her John, goes into the bathroom. The TV is on.
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't see the TV, but you hear the audio.
Mm.
And it's me. and the funniest thing is, I didn't know it. I mean, yeah, I signed a release. They were going to put it in a movie, whatever. And my brother, younger brother, he was in the theater watching the movie. And he jumps up and says, "That's my brother." Oh, it was, yeah.
I thought you were going to say it was the scene from Love Court. They decided to use it for something else.
Yeah, well, they needed something on the TV, and they owned it. They didn't have to pay rights or anything. They owned the thing.
Well,
and it was funny because when I got the contract, I called my agent, and I said, they've got this thing. It says, I'm signing this to get a fee in perpetuity throughout the universe, all this stuff. And he said, just sign it. I'm thinking, in perpetuity in the universe? Where are they going to do this, on Mars?
Oh, man. This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. We're talking with Ed Mackay and his time in game shows. And next time we'll be talking with him about more game shows, as well as one of his first times at a rock station. I want to find out about that. He had a good story about a station called K-Wave, not to be confused with 94.7 The Wave. Pardon my horrible singing, folks. That's why I'm a DJ, not a singer. And we'll be back soon after this.